On ABC Radio Melbourne and Victoria, this is the Conversation Hour with Jon Faine.
The NBN. Does it work for you? Is it doing what you thought it was going to do? Is it living up to its promise? It's about as radical an invention as the wheels, steam engines and electricity. I mean, the internet, not just the NBN, but the internet, it's right up there. It's a, momentous thing in human history. And Australia's national broadband network was going to be our gateway to the digital economy. But the infrastructure, well, is it compromised by political pragmatism? Has it been in some way undone by decisions and deals that have been made behind the scenes? Is it vulnerable to what I'm calling leapfrog technology? In other words, something that leaps right over the top because we now have so much mobile technology around that the idea of a fixed point for your computer is itself becoming an anachronism. Are we spending billions on something that will soon be technologically redundant? Does the NBN become a stranded asset? A bit like a coal mine. My guests in the studio to answer your questions and undoubtedly conduct the debate in a civil and fair fashion are Kylie Lindsay, who's a Senior Corporate Affairs Manager with NBN Co. Kylie, good morning to you.
Good morning, Jon. Thanks for having me on.
And Associate Professor Mark Gregory from Network Engineering at RMIT University. He leads the Network Engineering Research Group. Mark, welcome back and thank you for giving us your time.
Good morning, Jon.
Can we start perhaps with you, the problems? We'll come to the politics and the nitty-gritty of it all in a moment. The ambit, the big picture. Let's not assume everyone understands what was promised or expected and how we've ended up with what we've got.
Okay, I think the fastest way to explain where we're at today is to identify that in New Zealand and in the UK, the incumbent telco, in our case that would be Telstra, has now been split into two companies, so wholesale and retail. And in both those areas, the UK and in New Zealand, that means you've got a wholesale company that's able to provide infrastructure and able to provide that infrastructure at fair price to all the retail companies that want to sell different products and services over that infrastructure. And so we don't have that scenario. And so what that means is that we've got this NBN Co, which is beholden to Telstra for about $1 billion a year for the next 30-odd years.
Because it needs those little copper wires that connect to everyone's home.
Well, it's not just the copper wires, it's the telephone exchanges, it's the backhaul links and all the rest of it. And so what it means is NBN Co is trying to, if you like, build a business, trying to build this next generation network, and they can't do it economically because they've got this huge weight on their shoulders, and that's Telstra. They're forever having to pay more money to Telstra. So if you look at what's now happened in the UK and New Zealand, they don't have a usage charge. So it's all-you-can-eat internet. So what that means is there's an access fee, but no usage fee. We call it a CVC charge in Australia. And so by getting rid of the CVC charge and having an access fee only...
In other words, you can download as much as you want. There's no limits on how much you can connect and use, yeah?
That's right. And so in New Zealand now, what they're doing is that they're building their network in New Zealand to provide between 90 to 100% of whatever your plan is. So that means if you're on a 100/40 plan, you would get 90 to 100% of that connection.
100/40, what does that mean?
Well, 100 megabits per second down and 40 megabits per second up.
Right.
And so in New Zealand, the network's being built to provide between 90 to 100% of that speed all day, 24/7. In Australia, as we know, because of the CVC charge...
Because of the usage charge. If you downloaded movies all day, you'd end up with a huge bill.
Well, it's not just that. It's the RSPs are not buying enough capacity.
The what? Sorry,
the service providers.
Yeah.
And so what that means is during the peak hours, some Australians are reporting they're getting 5%.
In other words, if your neighbours are all doing the same thing, you're all trying to get your information through a congested pipe and it slows right down and drives you nuts.
That's right. And so we've got areas where they're typically getting 5% of what they're paying for. And that's why we've just seen the ACCC have announced a monitoring activity that's going to go on.
Yeah, they want 2,000 people to volunteer to put a little meter on their line and see what's actually happening. So I'll come back to you, of course, Mark. Thank you for setting the scene. Kylie Lindsay, Senior Corporate Affairs Manager with NBN Co, is here as well to take your calls and workshop what has gone right and what has gone wrong with Australia's national broadband network. And Kylie, thank you very much.
No problem.
Let's look at the good bits first and then let's try and address the bad bits.
Sure. Look, there's a lot of great things about the NBN. The one thing I would say is that we are really, we can't compare ourselves to other countries. Australia is such a vast place. There is very small population in certain areas. Comparing that to somewhere like New Zealand or the UK, we're not comparing apples to apples. We can look back at things that have gone wrong, and we're talking about decisions that were made back in the 90s here. Obviously, we will disagree on what is the right thing or the correct way that we should have moved forward, but they're decisions that were made, and we have to work with what we've got right now.
Sure.
So the NBN network is rolling out to premises all across Australia.
Fibre to the node now, not fibre to the premise. Now,
we're actually a multi-technology mix. So there was a debate, which is well and truly over now. We are halfway through the build and powering along. We're getting over 70,000 premises ready for service each month. It's a huge thing that's occurring at the moment. It's a big nation-building project.
Okay,
so we've got this multi-technology mix.
Yep.
There's fibre to the premise, which we still do use.
Which is a piece of cabling that goes all the way to the wall of your house that you can plug into, which gives you absolute U-Butte whiz-bang fibre optic technology all the way to your home.
That's right. So it's fibre that goes all the way to a box on the side of your house.
Yep.
The
like
difficulty
cable TV,
with that, of course, is we have to dig up yards and attach things to houses.
Which is why you're not doing it anymore.
Also, it was a very expensive way of doing things.
Slow and expensive. So that
Correct.
was Malcolm Turnbull's breakthrough when he became the minister. Under the Tony Abbott government, he said, we're not going to do that anymore, and changed it to what's called fibre to the node. So explain what that is instead.
Well, it's actually more than that, John. It's a multi-technology mix. So fibre to the node makes up one of those. And what that is we roll fibre a long way down into the network, so into your street. Each node looks after about 200 premises, and from there we connect your existing copper connection, which is generally a fairly short distance, to the node. So it's driving that fibre deeper into the network. We've actually just announced a trial of what we call our fibre to the curb technology. So that's again part of the multi-technology mix, and that's driving the fibre even further down. That's right to your front footpath, and again,
still with a copper connection
Indeed.
from the fibre to the house.
Yep.
So the limit is the copper pipe. Surely the bit of copper is the constraint on getting better connections.
Look, it can be, certainly, particularly if it needs remediation, but, there is no doubt that it's far more cost-effective to remediate the troublesome copper than it is to do that digging up of people's yards, their roads, their driveways, their ponds, attaching things to the side of houses, particularly heritage houses. We had some, terrible problems with that. We also have other technologies, though. There's not just those two. We've got our HFC or pay TV technology, and that's using the old that's using the pay TV network that we currently have, and using that to also run NBN. We then have our fixed wireless, which is generally in the more regional areas or the outer suburban areas.
Satellite dishes and things?
Well, they're little fixed wireless dishes, yes. And that is an absolutely amazing product. If I had that in my house, I'd be thrilled, because we just did a test recently where we got more than a gig. And next year we'll be selling 140 plans for that. And then just finally we have our Sky Muster satellite service as well.
For truly remote communities. Now,
Indeed.
Kylie, the way you make it sound, no one's got any reason to complain, and yet you and I and Mark, we all know that in fact there's plenty of reasons why people complain. Now, the main reason people complain is, as Mark was saying before, they in fact swap cable internet for NBN and find themselves going backwards. How can that be?
Well, if they have cable internet, they don't need to. The NBN is not. We don't force people onto the NBN. People can make a choice. They can choose to go with the NBN or with another option.
But the promise that NBN seduces people with is for these wonderful U-Butte bells and whistles, and then they find, in fact, it's just not sustained.
Look, I would disagree with that. I mean, we all know here that fibre is faster than copper. It's the gold standard. But we were mandated to provide internet to as many people as we could, as quickly as we could, at the best price we could. And the reality is, and these are the facts, John, 80% of our customers are only ordering a 25.5 service, which I might add is considered fast broadband, or lower at this stage. Now, that's going to increase over time with 8K TVs and 4K TVs and lots of streaming. And we know that...
in fact, those behaviour patterns are changing almost by the minute.
Yeah.
Households now are finding that they want far more capacity than they ever in their wildest dreams.
Well, even with our NBN users, they are streaming double the amount of an ADSL.
So, Mark, people thought, oh, well, I'm not an architect, I'm not sending CAD plans backwards and forwards, what would I want the NBN co for? And now we're finding even simple households. You might have a couple of kids doing homework or someone doing a project for uni and mum and dad wanting to get some work done at home, and suddenly no one can get anything done.
Oh, most certainly. But just before I talk about that, it's important to pick up a couple of the points that Kylie made and just to correct a few things. Kylie's quite correct that the government gave NBN Co the mandate to roll out the network as cheaply as possible. But let's look at that. It's a 10-year program. The cost of copper, keeping copper in the ground, is twice as expensive as the operating cost of fibre. So if you do the sums, it works out that after 7 years, the cost of the copper network means that NBN Co is running effectively at a loss. So if they had have kept going with fibre, by the time the NBN Co rollout was finished, the fibre would be cheaper than copper. Now, this is a fact based on international numbers that have come out of the US, UK, New Zealand. Now, the other comment that Kylie made was that Australia is such a large country. Well, China's a large country as well, and they're only doing fibre to the premises in China. Oh, Russia's another large country. They're only doing fibre to the premises as well. In fact, if you look at it, out of 180 countries, which I can roll off the top of my head, we're the only one that's doing copper. Now, the other thing, of course...
Just on that before, and I will let you get back to your other point. I thought it would have made sense every time there was a copper maintenance or repair issue, rather than replacing or fixing up the copper with copper, surely while you've got everything open and the pits and all the rest of it, you'd replace it with fibre. But they're not even doing that. No,
unfortunately, the NBN Co has been out and bought something like 18,000 metres or whatever, or kilometres or something of copper recently, so that they can remediate the copper. So we're actually the only country in the world that I know of that's actually buying copper at the moment to build a copper network. And the other interesting thing that Kylie mentioned, of course, was that how wonderful this is. Well, the interesting thing was that back in the 80s, the textbook that I was using to teach the students back then said that the average home needed 54 megabits per second for the average home back in the 80s. Now, what we're seeing, of course, is that homes regularly in New Zealand, UK and the US, the average home during the evening are now using more than 100 megabits per second, the average home. And so to say that 25 megabits per second is so wonderful is not. And the last point that Kylie made was that most people are choosing 12/1 and 25/5 in Australia is quite true. They are. And that's because the price here is so high. Compared with everywhere else overseas, including New Zealand, in New Zealand the cost of 100/40 is cheaper than the cost of 25/5 in Australia.
Let's get into it. We've got a full board of calls. We've got zillions of text messages and two guests in the studio. Kylie Lindsay from NBN Co and Mark Gregory from RMIT. And let's get to your calls. Liz in Pakenham. Morning to you, Liz.
Good morning. Look, I just want to clarify a few things that we found from experience. The house is only 10 years old. We purchased it 12 months ago. And you do not have an option. You have to have NBN. It's not a choice. There is nothing else. So that's a myth as well. But our speeds, we started getting 100 speed we ordered, because that's what we'd had at internet in our other suburb, Ferntree Gully, when we moved. And we can only get below 30 speed. You can't get any more. It won't cover it. It drops out all the time. There's too many people using it, and there's nothing anyone can do.
Have you had someone come out and look at all the rest of it, Liz?
We've had all that. I've been to the Ombudsman. I've been everywhere.
Yep.
And basically it comes down to, that's why everyone's on the cheap package, because they've just had to put us down to the cheap package. That's all they can provide.
Okay, let's get a response for you from Kylie.
G'day, Liz. Thanks for calling in. Look, you don't have to go with the NBN, but I suppose if you've got that copper line in your house already and the NBN's rolling out into your area, if you wish to stay with your landline internet service, that's when you need to switch over to the NBN. So I'm sorry if that was a bit confusing there.
There is no landline.
Sorry, so what?
There's only NBN.
Yes, but you have a connection at your home for the NBN. So that would be the copper line that you've got there.
You want to have a home phone, do you, Liz?
No, the home phone's all connected to the modem, but that was the only option we have. When I moved there, they said to me, both providers, that's all you can get. NBN, that's what's in that area.
Yeah,
it was not built with anything else.
Yeah, so sorry, when I say landline, I'm referring to the that copper line that you've got there. That brings the NBN into your premise. That fixed line, shall we call it?
Yeah.
Now with speed, it's an interesting issue because there are so many elements that can be problematic with the speed. Now, what we always say to people, and I know you've said you've been to your retail service provider already, but what we say to them is the best thing to do if you have a concern is to always go there first because they have a full view of the network. And I mean, the speed can be something that's actually going on in their network or in the amount of capacity they're buying that goes out into the global sphere. But it can also be things like interference at your home or the age of your modem. We hear all the time about modems needing to be replaced, but also the equipment that you've got in your home. So they're all things that are really important to look at.
Have you done all this already, Liz?
Done all that, done everything 1,000,001
yeah.
times.
So we do provide a speed estimate prior to an area or to a premise becoming ready for service, and then we do a monthly speed reporting thing, and that goes to your service provider.
But Kylie, I'm sorry, Liz's story
and
is
that's
told
done. The service provider said
over
the
and
speed
over
cannot go.
And Liz, I have heard this story countless times now, and everyone involved blames everybody else, but no one actually fixes it.
Correct. But even the Ombudsman did nothing.
Yep.
But let's talk about this because our mandate is 25.5 wholesale speed to every premise in Australia.
So what speed's that? I only understand 30 is the low speed, 100 is the fast speed.
So 100 is your download speed and the 30 is your upload speed. So are you on? Do you know if you're on a 140 plan?
We were on a 100 plan,
Yep.
and we can't. But they told us to cut it back because they cannot provide that level of speed. They can't even guarantee the low speed of 30. Half the time we're getting 17, 3, 4, 11. We're not even getting the low speed.
So that's your download speed. Now, as I said, there's a number of factors that can influence that. But the important thing too is that we are talking. When I talk about 25.5 or 140, that's a wholesale speed.
Sure, but the point is, I mean, here we are, Mark. Liz's case is almost classic, isn't it?
Absolutely.
We are inundated here at the ABC. We have people saying, "Can you help us?" We're just so frustrated. And we've heard this over and over again. What's your take on it, Mark?
Well, we all warned the coalition before they became government that this would be the result of their plan, and that's why half an hour after they released their plan and the big media launch in 2013, I called it a lemon, and it is a lemon for that very reason, because you've got two things happening. One is that you've got this CVC charge, which is so high that companies are buying not enough capacity, which means that people don't get what they want. And the second thing that's happening is that you're rolling out a copper network where a lot of people can only get speeds that are no better than ADSL 2+ over that copper network. Now, if you then add into that the fact that the copper costs twice as much as fibre to operate, you'd have to ask yourself what sort of a dunce would design and put in place a system like this.
Liz, I've got a full board. I'm going to move on, and you've articulated the problem brilliantly for us, and thank you for that. John in South Morang. Morning, John.
Good morning, John.
Yes, you're on air now.
Yeah, I've got fibre to the house. My daughter used to work for an NBN company out of our house. I've got some speed tests here. I'm paying for 100 over 40. the speed tests on April the 8th this year. The maximum was 11 download, 0.72 upload.
0.7?
0.72 upload.
Oh.
Now, that's, like I said, my daughter worked for the company until it went bankrupt.
That's prehistoric.
I've had to swap over a few different companies now. I'm paying, like I said, for 100 over 40. I don't get it. The actual installation, I'm an electrician by trade. The installation of the fibre of the house was just dagged over all the beams. And I store stuff under the house. I had to go and clip the cables up so I didn't break them.
Right.
The whole thing is just a joke. The price they charge and the standard they deliver is nowhere near what it should be.
So do you have a functioning internet service or not?
I do have a functioning internet service, but sometimes, not all the time. A lot of times Netflix buffers, so I can't even watch a movie without it buffering.
What, even while not just at the start, but right through?
Right through. A lot of times the movies sort of freeze and then it'll come back on. Like I said, my daughter worked through it. We've changed modems. She's gone through and done the speed tests.
Yeah.
The speed test, it is the speed test to the house that is slow.
All righty, good on you, and thank you for your story as well. I'll get back to my guests in a moment. Some text messages as well. I moved into a new apartment in January in Yarraville, says Jeremy. Was told NBN the only option. Can't get it though. The exchange is full. I've had no internet for 6 months. No projected connection date yet. Kylie, there's a few people saying if you can offer solutions, that'd be good. Otherwise, all we're doing is got steam coming out of our ears. Stephen in Blackgowrie and a few others saying that as well. The most important infrastructure project in Australia is a total turkey. Heads should roll. There are a few people who feel sorry for you, having to be the representative for what they regard as a bit of a dog of a project, I might say as well. I live within 50 k's of the CBD. Please ask why I can't even get an NBN connection, let alone fibre to the premises. Seriously, says Joe, who's near Whittlesea. I have a letter from NBN Co to say we must connect within 18 months and then our existing connections will be turned off, says Peter in Elstonwick. There is no choice. To say there's choice is rubbish, says Peter in Elstonwick. And NBN are restricting access to the public to tap directly into fibre. A fibre cable running 5 metres from our fence. It's there, but we have to wait years before they'll let us access it. So why do we have to wait years? We want fibre to the home. We're prepared to pay for it, but they won't let us do it. So I've got 250 or so text messages. I'm reading out half a dozen just as an illustration, Kylie, of the levels of frustration, to say nothing of the people saying I'm in regional Australia, regional Victoria, and you think you people in the city have got a problem, you should try living out here. Yeah,
absolutely. And that is why the NBN is such an important thing. I mean, we are delivering a service to every single premise. Sure, China's a big place, but there's a hell of a lot more people that live there than in the middle of Australia. Look, it is a very complex project.
We're not talking about the middle of Australia. We're talking about the suburbs of Melbourne and
let's
regional
talk about
Victoria.
there as well. So, for example, Jon, who we just spoke to before, with the fibre to the premise connection, there is clearly a problem there with something that's going on with his modem or his connection.
He's an electrician. He's checked everything. He sounds pretty tech savvy to me.
But fibre to the premise, Mark is clearly a big fan of it. It's the gold standard. Should be running fine. So what people need to do in this situation, they need to remember, and this is not me trying to pass the blame or pass the buck. We are a wholesaler. Our customers are actually the service providers, and obviously I can't mention them on the ABC. But people really need to go there first and say, please escalate my fault.
Greg is a retail service provider. Morning to you, Greg. Welcome to our forum.
Good morning, John, and thanks for taking my call. I'd love to give you a retail service provider's perspective on the world according to the NBN.
Go right ahead.
So, firstly, CVC costs, which have been mentioned a number of times. So to put things in perspective, if a customer expects that they're going to get 100 megabits all the time, the wholesale cost to a retail service provider to buy 100 megabits for one customer would be $1,750 per month. Now, when a customer expects that they're going to pay somewhere between, say, $89 and $159 a month for a 100 megabit plan, the math simply doesn't add up for me to provide 100 megabits to one customer 100% of the time.
No.
So this is where the CVC cost is completely and utterly flawed and needs to be abolished, as you've mentioned previously. Now, yes, there is a cost to run the network, but at $17.50 a meg, I cannot provide my customer a 100 megabit plan at 100 megabits 100% of the time. So that's to put the CVC costs in perspective. It's at $17.50 per megabit.
But you can't change that, nor can anybody else. That's mandated, is my understanding of it.
Correct. It is mandated, and we live within those means. But this is about...
Mark's shaking his head. I'll come to him in a moment.
I'm shaking my head as well.
No, that's fine. I mean, but again, it's about making sure that the consumer understands that they are not going to get 100 megabits 100% of the time with pricing at that rate. What we're seeing from a retail service provider's point of view is appointment delays, massively missed appointments. It's already been mentioned in the media around the 8 days to connect an HFC service. We're seeing services blown out to weeks and weeks and weeks. Missed appointment after missed appointment. It's already been brought up again around the communication of the disconnect process, and this again is not understood by the layperson who is expecting to have a service where they pick up their phone and they have a dial tone.
Yep.
And that's what they've been used to with Telstra for the last 100-odd years through the PMG and then through Telstra, is they've expected I pick up phone, I make a phone call. So that disconnect process has been pretty poor. And a lot of people are kind of left in limbo with, I don't know what I need to do.
All right, well, let's get back to Mark, who was shaking his head vigorously when I said before that the user charges are locked in to the system the way it's structured at the moment. You were saying, no, it's not.
No, the decision to have a connection charge, the AVC, and the CVC, which was the usage charge, was a decision made by NBN Co. It's not mandated by government. Now, the reason was that...
Sorry, it was mandated by NBN Co. as part of their business plan,
model, yes,
rather than the regulations that government introduced.
That's
okay,
right.
Thank you.
And the reason we did have these usage charges in Australia was that most of the content that we accessed in Australia, Google, YouTube, and all these other websites, were all located offshore. Mm-hmm. And so therefore you had the high cost of international traffic. Now, what's happened in the last 10 years is that we've had this development of these things called content delivery networks. And so that means that the content that's accessed is moved closer to the customers. So we've now got YouTube servers in Australia. We've got Google servers and Microsoft and Facebook.
So if I'm looking at a little video, it's not coming to me from San Francisco. It's coming to me from...
Sydney.
Sydney, okay.
So what that means is that this high cost of this international traffic, for example... the traffic that we're sending overseas, in the last 5 years, the amount of traffic has decreased by 70%.
Right. So all those costs to them are coming down, but the charges are staying up.
That's right. Now, what's happened, of course, with these CVC charges, now all of our networks, mobile network, NBN network, all the rest, have a usage charge. And so what's happened over those last 5 years is that extra money, that extra profit, has gone straight into profit. So the telcos are making a lot of money out of usage charges. Now, as I said before, New Zealand got rid of the usage charge. Mm-hmm. And so it's all you can eat all day and night. Now, they've built their network because the cost of optical equipment has become so cheap recently. Yep. They've built their network so that all customers are getting between 90 and 100% of their planned speed 24/7. As we've already heard today, Australian customers are lucky to get 5%.
And that's a structural flaw. That's nothing to do with equipment. It's entirely to do with the system we've introduced and the rules we've created to govern it.
That's right. So this particular problem, NBN Co. could solve tomorrow if it got rid of the CVC charge. There is no justification for it other than a failed and flawed business plan.
I've got text messages saying, can we have a royal commission into the NBN, please? Alison in Wangaratta. Morning to you, Alison.
Good morning. I live on a property just out of Wangaratta, and we have the NBN Sky Muster satellite. Apparently it's the only option available for us.
So what do you have? You have like a dish on your roof or something, Alison?
We do, yep. Yes, we have a dish on the roof. There's about 10 providers that can offer us plans, and none of them can offer any more than 60 gig a month of data. We run a farm business from home. I regularly work from home. We've got 3 kids. So all of our data is basically used up before midway through the month, and then it slows to a snail's pace.
Why can't they offer you more?
There's about 10 companies that you can use, and none of them offer more. That's for peak usage. They can offer more for off-peak, but my understanding is that's sort of 11 p.m. till 4 a.m. usage.
Which is no use to a family at all. So
that's right.
And so you're told that's just what? That's it. Take it or leave it.
Yep, that's it. That's the only thing that we can do.
How extraordinary. Kylie.
Yeah, look, we do have phase plans for our satellite service because it is a finite resource. But we're doing a lot of work in that space. The amount of data that people can get now compared to what they had under our old interim satellite service is phenomenally more than what they had. Obviously, in this case, it's still not enough. We're looking at business grade services, and the other thing I would say is watch this space. We really are working to look at how we can provide more data to people in those areas.
Alison, the problems in the city are obvious, the problems in regional towns are obvious, but for people in remote Australia, it is extraordinarily frustrating. I mean, this is the sort of stuff that brings governments down, I reckon, from what I've seen. Cathy McGowan up your way, Alison, campaigned on the NBN Co and said it was one of the most powerful things that tipped Sophie Mirabella out of Parliament and got her votes instead.
Yes, that's right. And, clearly for us, and we're only 15 minutes out of Wangaratta, it hasn't helped us at this point.
Yep. I wouldn't be surprised, Mark. Do you think there's a bit of an NBN rebellion underway across Australia?
Well, look, we know that a lot of the regional groups have been into the offices of many of the Liberals recently, and the Liberals are quaking with fear as to what will happen at the next election. And that's why, as we saw the other day in the Senate, the coalition ministers were actually the ones that are the most savage at NBN Co in that meeting, because they're seeing a big revolt across the country. But let's just go back and look at one of the particular problems that NBN Co is faced with, and it's not caused by NBN Co. We have lots of fibre in Australia, huge amounts of fibre. We've got many towns all over the country that have fibre running through those towns.
You mean for cable television?
No, the fibre is actually there because it goes to mobile stations, mobile phone.
To mobile towers.
Yes, and so the fibre is owned by Telstra. But the price that Telstra's put on that fibre to use the fibre, the price is so high that NBN Co won't use it. So, for example, this morning I had a phone call from a former mayor of Julia Creek.
Where's Julia Creek?
In Queensland. And, of course, Julia Creek's got 400 people. They've got mobile phone. They've got fibre. But they're being put onto the satellite service because the price that Telstra wants to use the fibre is so high that NBN Co won't use the fibre.
Even though it's there?
Even though it's there.
So it's Telstra's fibre. It's a bit like the coal mine where they're saying, no, you can't use our railway line, so they're going to build another railway line right next to it for someone else to use instead of sharing.
Absolutely, yep. And so this is a failure of government and government policy, not just NBN Co's failure. This is a problem that NBN Co is stumped with all around the country. And so what's happening is you've got all these small communities that have got fibre, but they're all being put onto the satellite. And, of course, the satellite is a fixed resource, as we know. And the other thing, of course, with the satellite, it's got 15-year life. So we're now going to see that by the end of the rollout, 2020, those satellites will be one-third into their life. It takes 5 years to get a satellite up. NBN Co should have ordered another satellite by now.
Yep.
Right?
I think one crashed, didn't it?
No, they both went up.
Didn't one blow up as it went up in the air or something?
Not one of ours, thankfully.
Not one of ours, okay.
Stop saying terrible things about our satellites, John.
So they should have ordered a third satellite by now, but they haven't. And as every day goes by, what's going to happen in the 2020s is that regional remote Australia is going to be double whammied because they should have gotten another satellite ordered by now.
All right.
Yeah, but Mark, you're assuming that that we're doing nothing in that space, and it's just not true. You know, that is something we're looking at, but that's a very expensive thing to do, of course. We're also looking at expanding our fixed wireless footprint, which, as I said before, is, I believe, an excellent service. And the other thing we're looking at too, as a potential, is to other satellite providers to see if we can use their bandwidth.
Okay, but regional remote Australia, the same as the rest of Australia, our data usage is going up. It's doubling every couple of years. So people in regional remote Australia, their usage is doubling every couple of years.
And trying to catch up.
Yeah, and we're aware of that. I mean, the other point too is that we do have upgrade plans for our technology.
Please, what are they?
For
the satellites.
For the satellites. We're looking at increasing the data packages already.
But there's a fixed...
we are looking at rolling out more of the fixed wireless network to areas.
The satellite? You're going to put another satellite up?
Instead of satellite. We are looking into that option as well.
Text messages galore. My guests in the studio, Kylie Lindsay from NBN Co and Mark Gregory from Network Engineering at RMIT University. 70 years ago, says this texter, when the telephone was connected to our farmhouse, the line was left hanging on the neighbour's fence. They haven't come back in 70 years, and I'm not waiting with bated breath for the fast internet either. I quite like that one.
That did give me, I think it gave both of us a bit of a chuckle, actually.
I'm receiving NBN Available Join Up Now flyers from various providers, and for possible installation in 2019. How many people are being suckered into paying up now?
Yeah, that's a retail service provider thing. So some of them are doing that. We don't put out any sort of communications until after an area is ready for service.
Helen in Rippleside wants the NBN and Telstra to be merged and nationalised. It's a shame the NBN Co rep starts each answer with some spin, is the allegation from Eddie from Mentone, who wants to hear something else. Someone saying, yes, I will vote according to which party's got the best NBN plan. In Mount Eliza, mostly we have 90/40 service with fibre to the premise service, so we're pretty happy. TPG have announced a plan to build their own network because they're so... there's a rude word in there about the way things are going otherwise. When Telstra ran my Foxtel cable service, I could get 115 megabits a second, but now the NBN run the same cable, the same installation, I'm getting 14 instead of 115 megabits a second. So about not even 15% of what I used to get through the same pipe run by a different company. How does consumer law allow service providers to sell a service they can't supply? Why isn't there a class action over this? And in fact, I reckon there probably will be. And Mark's nodding in agreement. And if you think big class actions so far have been a picnic, boy, wait for that one. Jeff in Smythesdale, morning to you, Jeff.
G'day, John. Don't want to add too much to the cavalcade of complaints about services, but regional Victoria and regional Australia is largely reliant on the fixed wireless service, and the word fixed is meant to indicate that each tower has a fixed number of subscribers on it to guarantee the service. What all the retailers are doing is overselling that number of subscribers, and so during the day you get your 25.5, but as kids get home and parents start watching streaming at night, it drops down to 1 and 2, and I used to get 6 on ADSL. But my solution, like I said, I don't want to add too much to the cavalcade of complaints, but the solution is for the government to regulate that the retailers cannot sell more capacity than the wholesaler provides.
Okay, well, that's certainly one of the options. I'm going to whip through lots of calls because there are people who've been waiting ages, and I'll get back to my guests, Kylie and Mark, in a moment. Peter in Toorak. Morning, Peter.
Oh, good morning, John. I've got a more pedestrian complaint. It's not about internet speed, but it's got to do with your telephone service is now switched over to the NBN, and there's two aspects of that. I'm going to be getting NBN on the HFC, on the Foxtel cable. Number one, there's no battery backup for the network terminating unit. Number two, it does not support most of the telephone services which I use, which is a security alarm, and I also use used to use dial-up modems for remote access to certain equipment. But the most important is the security alarm, and the monitoring services do not work over the telephone once it's switched over to the NBN.
And they never will? Is that what you're being told, Peter?
Yes, definitely.
So you've got to completely reconfigure your alarm. A lot of people have those invalid alert systems.
Well, it's not just reconfiguring, it's a huge box, and it costs thousands, and it only has one remote interface, which is a telephone line interface.
Yep.
And even if I connect that to a telephone line, the signals all of the providers say it will not work.
All righty, good on you. Thank you. I've got a lovely text here, it makes me laugh. You know, the television program Utopia, which is about the nation building. Authority. Someone saying, is this a radio play version of Utopia? Is it on this time every week? Very good. David in Mount Eliza. Morning, David.
Yeah, hi, John. We're supposed to be a clever country or innovation nation, but I had an experience last year. It took 5 attempts to get NBN connected to my place in Mount Eliza, and I've got 4 modems. The system worked so well at the Telstra end that they cut off my ADSL service and we could not get it reconnected. This went on for 3 months. The system worked so well, every time they sent someone out to connect, Star Trek Express would deliver the day before a modem. So it took them 5 attempts. We've now got fibre to the house. And if anyone wants some spare modems, they can give me a call. But, I mean, it was ludicrous. I mean, Telstra kept me well informed of what was going on. They loved me to death with their customer service.
But they couldn't get it to work properly.
Well, they told me it was between them and NBN, and, you know, there's some firewalls and whatever on communication. They kept telling me about rebuilding the order. I mean, I've worked in business, and it was ludicrous listening to the explanations they gave. I mean, eventually we got a good service, but I think we're a much more clever country than this, and can't we just get our act together and get ourselves organised?
Well, is it as simple as that, Mark? Getting our act together and getting organised?
I think there needs to be the political will, because what we've got is this problem that everything comes back to bad decision making since the when we started to deregulate telecommunications. If you were to look at Australia from the outside and to look at what's happened since deregulation, then you would just see bad decision after bad decision after bad decision. And to be honest, the decisions that I've seen to go with an obsolete fibre to the node rollout in 2013, that sort of tops the bad decisions.
That's the Tony Abbott decision, Malcolm Turnbull, Tony Abbott decision.
That's right.
To kill off the original version.
Fibre to the premises.
The Kevin Rudd vision of a whiz-bang U-Butte hamburger with the very expensive system. We were told we couldn't afford it.
Well, that's right. And it's important to focus on that particular point. If you look at NBN Co's fudged, if you like, annual reporting, they still report the cost of fibre to the premise as $4,400 per premise. In fact, I think it's gone up recently to $4,405 per premise. In New Zealand, it's $2,800 per premise. They've decreased the cost down 40% during their rollout in New Zealand. And yet in Australia, miraculously, unbelievably, NBN Co, the cost has gone up.
Kylie?
Just on the fibre to the premise issue there particularly. Look, I think that this is an argument that we've already had. I mean, we're halfway through the build. We are rolling things out, going gung-ho, doing as much as we can, getting as much out there as we can.
Sure.
And we can keep talking about how good it would have been with fibre to the premise. And as I said to Mark and to you before, we all agree that it is definitely the fastest, but it is what it is, and the time for that argument is over for now.
Here's the problem. It's a bit like what's happening with solar power rollouts at the moment too. Solar power, at first it was a bit, boffiny, and then it became more mainstream, and then the prices started coming down, and now, they're sprouting up all over the joint, and people are saying, you Butte, this is great, I'm no longer on the grid. But then we still have a grid, and we still have to pay for a grid, and so the cost of the grid as well is still going to have to be somehow funded in the community. Let's go and talk now about the internet and about the broadband network. Your problem is that you're rolling out something that's got such bad brand recognition and such bad word of mouth around neighbourhoods, people, even when it's going past the house, don't want to connect to it, which means it costs even more than it would if it was being done properly.
Yeah, look, we do hear of course, situations where there is unhappiness, and that's what happens when you're rolling something as enormous as the NBN out.
No, it doesn't automatically.
Well,
it has happened here. I've got a full board. I've got literally, I can print out for you, probably 15 pages of text messages, 95% of which want to cut your head off.
But what I do want to say to you is we do have over 2 million people connected.
Yeah.
Now, yes,
and
there are
how many of them are happy? I don't
complain.
know, but they're certainly not getting in touch with us today.
We actually do
forum.
quite a lot of that sort of testing of people, and we use a third party and ourselves.
But my point to you is, in terms of the momentum, If you were rolling out something people wanted, then everyone would be contributing to its upkeep. But instead, you're rolling out something people are saying, I don't want, which means those people who are connecting to it are bearing an incredible cost, and other people are opting out.
At the end of the transition period, we're finding that about 75% of people are connecting to the NBN.
75% of people whose premises you're going past.
Correct, yes. And that is what we had forecast.
75%. So as you go down a street...
Yep. Once an area becomes ready for service, there's 18 months. Any area. So let's say pick a suburb. When that area becomes ready for service, there is a coexistence period of 18 months, and that's when the copper line and the NBN are sort of both there doing their thing. So the Telstra line, shall we call it, and us.
Do you accept that, Mark? 75% of people are signing up?
Oh, most certainly, because if you look at the statistics, about 82% of Australian premises are connected to the internet over fixed line. And so therefore you would expect that percentage, if they're forced onto the NBN, which they are after 18 months, you would expect that percentage to remain about the same. But the important point, which is what you picked up on before, is yes, they're connecting to the NBN, but they're not happy. And that's what I hear right around the country, is that we have a whole nation. It's remarkable how this government has created a nation that thinks the NBN is a lemon, collectively.
Philip in Sunbury, morning to you, and we're not going to get everybody's story to air, but let's grab a few more before the news. Go ahead, Philip.
Well, it's not the question of whether it's a service or not. This particular NBN system that put in is going to cost an elderly person or somebody that's handicapped their lives. I've been connected to NBN. I may be 86. I'm a member of the British Computer Society going back over 30 years. I have never seen such a mess. They've connected me over 2 months ago. Some days the system is so bad and I'm dependent on landline. I use Wi-Fi now. I've given it away, the other stuff. And some days we're cut off, and they have asked me to give my wife's phone number to a mobile phone number so that they can use my wife's phone as a supplementary exchange board. Yep. And I've had a phone call coming in from a guy coming from abroad on a plane and saying to me, how long have you been a private patient on a private number? I said, never. He said, I can't connect you.
Yeah, well, you have to use your phone as a hotspot. That's been happening more and more. Philip, thank you. I do want to get lots of callers to air. Sam in Windsor, morning to you.
Morning, John. How are you?
Good, go ahead.
I live in Windsor, and the cable there is good, but I come from regional Western Australia, and when I say regional, I mean 45 kilometres from the second biggest city. And when I go back there on the Sky Muster, they get 4 gig a month, and I run a service-based business in Melbourne. When I go back to see my parents, I can't actually operate my business.
4 gig a month?
That's all they get. And they have 4 foster kids, and they last about 3 or 4 days.
So is that on a satellite?
It's on a satellite.
Wow. That's a shocking service. I mean, that's starvation rations.
That doesn't sound like the Sky Muster service.
No.
It is exactly the Sky Muster service. I was there at Christmas. My sister's in the medical profession. We went back there and we both used the internet for 2 days, and we ended up sitting on the top of the hill with our phones and doing business.
Have they asked about what sort of other plans are available? Because there are certainly larger plans they can get. And
no, they're limited to 4 gig a month. That's what they're told because of where they are and the amount that the satellite can provide.
The other thing too is if they've got the foster children and they're doing distance education, we have certainly education portal things that give a lot more capacity. Sorry, gives a lot more capacity to people.
All right, look, sorry to hear about your problems, Sam. We're not actually trying to troubleshoot today, but we're trying to address the policy settings. But it's great to hear your experience to help us understand exactly how substandard the system is. Shane in Seaford, welcome to our forum.
G'day. I'd just like to say I went in and bought the modem at the shop, and I bought the upgraded modem, and the salesperson said that was a very good idea because it had a chip in it that connects to the broadband network, the mobile network. So, and it's got an inbuilt alarm as well.
So, sorry, Shane, you get It's like a little mobile hotspot as well.
Yes, if the NBN goes down, it goes over to the mobile network, and you hear, Dad, Dad.
Yeah, it's a new one. It only came out a couple of months ago, and it's fabulous.
So it offers a hotspot off mobile phones if your NBN connection drops out.
It will operate on either, that's correct, yeah.
Which is like what your phone does when you walk into a house. It'll default connect to the Wi-Fi if you've logged in before, or it'll work off the satellite off your phone signal.
Yeah, sorry, it's not a hotspot off your phone.
No.
It's actually the
it's a
4G device
modem,
is in there, correct?
But it works like a hotspot.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so there are, Mark, as our time runs out, and I've still got, I should say, Kylie, I have quite literally zillions of text messages. Whose idea was it to spend $800 million on the Optus cable system that was old and not usable? NBN Co wasted $800 million. Why do they try to hide it, says Andrew. Others saying it's all because of massive deals that are done behind the scenes between media empires. Rupert Murdoch gets more than his fair share of mention. Telstra, flexing its muscle with the government, gets its share of mentions. Any number of people with all sorts of skullduggery theories as to what was going on behind the scenes. Either way, 4 minutes to 12. Claire's joining us in a moment. Final words from Kylie and from Mark. I reckon this is as big an issue as work choices, health insurance. In the last state election, the CFA issue, Kylie, here in Victoria, I reckon this is one that's going to turn around, like 457 visas. This is going to turn around and bite this government big time if you guys can't sort it out soon.
Well, obviously, that's something you'd need to put to the politicians. We're just
very deftly sidestepped.
But very true. But very true.
It's undoubtedly true.
We are just there. We are working hard. We have our heads down and our bottoms up, and we are connecting as many people as we can, as quickly as we can. I acknowledge, of course, there are problems, and I'm sorry to hear that there are people who are unhappy with that system. I'm very keen to understand what it is that their problems are, so that we can address them.
And one of the failings, of course, is that the complaints mechanisms and processes make people feel even more disempowered, and they're not happy with that. But either way, Mark, final words.
So really what we can do is we can sum it up and just simply highlight the fact that every aspect of the NBN that we have is a failure. The choice of an obsolete technology, the fibre to the node, which is going to have to be replaced as soon as the government is replaced at the next election. The business model, which has got this usage charge, which is causing all of these congestion problems right around the nation, that's going to have to go. We've got stories coming out like NBN Co recently flying concrete to Christmas Island, 2 planes, $250,000 apparently, simply because they wouldn't get the concrete from a contractor. So they're wasting money hand over fist.
I don't even know what that one's about, but what I do know is that the accelerating rate of digital innovation makes this even more an imperative, even more urgent. People have zero threshold for delay on this stuff. It's like saying there's a blackout and we couldn't help it with power. It's simply unacceptable.
Most certainly. And the biggest thing that we need to remember is that the NBN is not about us. The NBN is about the next generation. It's about jobs in the digital economy.
Oh, stuff them. They can look after themselves.
It's about us as well.
Mark Gregory, Associate Professor of Network Engineering from RMIT University, and Kylie Lindsay, Senior Corporate Affairs Manager, doing a valiant job battling away for NBN Co. Kylie, really appreciate it. Thank you. Not an easy thing for you.
No problem. Anytime. Happy to come in.
So much passion coming out. And to all the people who waited and didn't get to air, I'm really sorry. To your text messages, thank you very much. I've tried as best I can to get a cross-section of them to air. This has been a special forum on the Conversation Hour on your ABC.